My name is Karen Swanson. I'm an educator. I'm a SIDS parent. I'm part of the Iowa SIDS Alliance. I am a board member also of the Iowa SIDS Alliance, and part of my mission in the month of October is to go around and give presentations regarding SIDS awareness. We have quite a few babies in Iowa that we've lost to SIDS, and unfortunately we had an incredible increase in the last 5 years, and we need some education to bring it down. 1/5 of all of our babies die in the caregiver's hands. Not because of the caregiver necessarily, but as caregivers you need to be aware of the statistics, you need to be aware of the risk reducers, and you need to be aware of how to handle some of these situations. I am from Southeast Iowa. I'm from Fairfield, and I moved back here to Fairfield after 15 years in Arizona about 3.5 years ago. I went to college in Arizona. I met my husband, the love of my life in Arizona. I had a career in Arizona. I was a teacher, I was an educator, and I had some children in Arizona as well. I have a bachelor's in English. I have a degree in education. Right now I'm working on my principal endorsement as well. My husband's name is Dave Swanson. You don't know him. He's not related to any Swansons here in town, in case you're wondering. He's from Minnesota. As I said, I was a teacher and a counselor, and I'm also a mother of 5 children. My oldest is 9, Rachel. Jonathan is 7. Benjamin, my middle child, would be 5 this spring. Unfortunately, he succumbed to SIDS in 1998 at the age of 3 months. My subsequent child, Sarah, is 3 years old, and I also have a 1-year-old, Matthew. So how did I get here? Why am I talking to you? Well, I did have an experience with SIDS prior to my son dying. I actually had a friend who lost their child to SIDS in 1996. I was back here visiting in Iowa when I got a frantic phone call from a mutual friend of ours that Karen's baby, Abby, had died at the caregiver's house on her 3rd day there. It's quite common, actually, for babies to die in the first week in the caregiver's hands. Unfortunately, in my experience, there has not been a lot of education on SIDS. I've had 5 children. Not once have I received any information in any of the hospitals that I've delivered babies in on SIDS. I don't know if any of you did as well. And I'm not sure if it's because our medical people do not want to offend. It's a joyous moment. Why scare these people? Unfortunately, I think they need to be educating a little bit more, because as a society, we hand down our rituals. And some of these rituals that we have in the United States is placing our babies on their tummies to sleep. When I lost my son Benjamin, I became an instant member of all SIDS groups. It's not one that you want to sign up for, actually, but I'm very, very fortunate that I was able to get involved in them. It was my last day of work. I had to go back to work early when my son died of SIDS. I was teaching, and I had been back to work for about 4 weeks, and the police showed up at the school where I was teaching. They asked me to come down to the office to discuss some matters, and of course I'm thinking that my dog must have run away or some ridiculous scenario like that. But when I got there, they told me that my son had stopped breathing, and they needed to take me immediately to the hospital. The police officer, along with the crisis counselor, took me to the hospital, where they took me into that little room that they tell you what's going on. Unfortunately, I consider it the horrible room, because that's where they told me that my son had died. I was very lucky. I had a lot of support. I had religious support. I had family support. I had friend support. A lot of people don't have that. My son died at the babysitter's house. He had a few risk factors that I'll be telling you about. He was sleeping on his tummy. He was 3 months old, which is a risk factor, unfortunately. And it was 87 degrees in the room that he died in. We spent the next year kind of recuperating from our loss. I became pregnant with Sarah, and I was due in July, and in May, my husband and I decided to trek across America, basically, to Iowa, and we moved here. And Sarah was born in Iowa, so we do have an Iowa child, actually, which was great. Again, she was born in Iowa City. No, we did not receive any SIDS education in Iowa City, although by then we knew about it, and they knew our situation, so they were very attuned to what was going on and knew they'd better be careful around me. Sarah was put on an apnea monitor. For those of you who don't know what an apnea monitor is, it actually monitors the heart rate and the breathing rate of a child or a person to make sure that that person is breathing. I'm telling you some of these facts so that when we get along in the presentation, you're going to go, oh, okay, I remember this now. Anyway, an apnea monitor, some SIDS parents use an apnea monitor. It has not been proven that that would have saved a child ever. In fact, a child has not ever been saved on an apnea monitor, but it would tell you if there was some cessation of breathing or heart rate. There's an alarm that sounds very loudly. We did use it with both of our last children. And knowing that this probably wouldn't save their life, however, there was just that little chance that maybe it would. So we decided to use it. With Sarah, we made sure that we sang happy birthday to her every month. We only had 3 months with Benjamin, and we wanted to make sure that we celebrated every moment that we could. I've been a stay-at-home mom for the last 3.5 years. It is challenging, and I admire each and every one of you for what you do, because essentially you're surrogate moms to those children that you have in your homes, and that is a big job. I stayed at home because I felt very guilty for not being there when Benjamin died. My babysitter, whom I love dearly, felt guilty because she was there. It was kind of a lose-lose situation for both of us. Little discussion about my babysitter. She did continue to sit for, in fact, she sat for my other 2 kids the following year. However, the emotional strain of that, she is now retired. She was babysitting for mainly older kids, but I think because of the years that she had put in caregiving, 30 years, she was really ready by the end of that. They say that SIDS death will affect at least 100 people, and I want my son's death to affect more than that. I hope that each and every one of you will learn something tonight, that you will go out and you will say to somebody else, I didn't know that. Did you know that? If you pass along one piece of information that you learned tonight, you carry on something that's very important to me. On Benjamin's headstone it reads, you will be remembered. And this is one reason why I go out in October, especially since it's SIDS Awareness Month, to make sure that everyone I can get to knows about SIDS. We have had quite a few deaths in Iowa in the past few years, and I think it's time that we have a little bit more education. I'm going to be using the overhead. I'm also going to be showing you some videos that we have. Unfortunately, you probably will never have seen this video. I believe it only plays about 3 o'clock in the morning. Iowa SIDS Alliance put this together as a public service announcement, and the only time that we could get it played.
Sometimes just loving a baby isn't enough. Sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS, can kill healthy babies. Always place your baby on its back to sleep at nap time and at night. Use a firm mattress in a safety-approved crib. Do not put pillows, blankets, bumper pads, or stuffed animals in the crib. Never smoke near a baby or during pregnancy. Do not overheat or overbundle your baby. No one knows for sure what causes SIDS, but you can reduce your baby's risks.
Everything I tell you tonight, I may tell you twice or 3 times. And that's to make sure that when you leave here, you have a good understanding of what we think SIDS is, what might help reduce that risk, and what may make a baby's sleeping environment safer and protect you as well. The Iowa SIDS Alliance just passed the torch from one director to the next. We have a new director. We are starting a new campaign, and our campaign is actually geared toward caregivers because we want to protect you, we want to protect the kids, and we want to make sure that we have safe sleeping environments. What you might learn tonight is probably going to have a light bulb go off in your head. You might rush home and change a few things right away, and that's okay. What I want you to keep in mind is I don't want you to panic, and I want you to make sure if you have a question to ask me at any time. Denise Mugin is our new director of the Iowa SIDS Alliance. She is the first director that we've had who is also a SIDS parent. So it's a unique relationship that we have. This next video is geared specifically towards caregivers. Every office, like Lori's, has a copy. Our public library also has a copy of this. Okay. Can you hear it back there? Do I need to turn it up a little?
Can you imagine a job any more important than being trusted with someone else's baby? By entrusting their child to a daycare provider, even if only for a short while, a parent is saying, I completely trust you with the life of my child. What a rewarding and challenging responsibility. The job of a child care provider is one of the most important around in the eyes of many parents who rely on them every day. Child care providers like yourself are always faced with situations that require careful thought. One of these situations occur when you put an infant down for a nap or to bed for the night. My name is Denise Mugin, a nurse and a board member of the Iowa SIDS Alliance. I'd like to talk to you about sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS. SIDS is the term used for the sudden death of any infant under 1 year of age that remains unexplained after a complete investigation. About 3,000 babies die of SIDS in the United States each year. And even though doctors and nurses still don't know the exact cause of SIDS, they have uncovered some extremely valuable statistics. Let's take a look at these statistics now.
Most SIDS deaths occur when a baby is between 2 and 4 months of age. SIDS is the leading cause of death in babies between 1 month and 1 year of age. More boys than girls die from SIDS. More SIDS deaths occur in colder months. A SIDS death happens very quickly with no signs of suffering. Babies placed to sleep on their stomachs or sides are much more likely to die of SIDS than babies placed to sleep on their backs. Let's watch as this child care provider is getting ready to put a baby down for a nap. Because many SIDS deaths happen while infants are sleeping in a crib, SIDS is commonly referred to as crib death. But it's important to know that cribs don't cause SIDS. Prior to 1992, more than 5,000 babies in the U.S. died from SIDS every year. Then the American Academy of Pediatrics recommended placing infants on their backs to sleep to reduce SIDS. As tummy sleeping has gone down, the number of infant deaths due to SIDS has been reduced to fewer than 3,000 each year. The first and best way to reduce the risk of SIDS is to always place the infant on its back to sleep at nap time and nighttime. When it's time for the baby to sleep, there are several other ways to help reduce the risk of SIDS. Always make sure to place the baby on a firm mattress, such as the one in this safety-approved crib. Don't ever put a baby to sleep on a soft mattress, sofa cushion, waterbed, sheepskin, or other soft surface. Next,
Remove all fluffy and loose bedding and other soft items from the sleeping area. Down comforters, quilts, bumper pads, stuffed animals, or pillows are examples of items that might pose a threat. Watch as this child care provider double checks to make sure the baby's head and face stay uncovered during sleep time. It's important to keep all blankets and coverings away from the baby's mouth and nose and out of the crib. You should only use sleep clothing with no other covering over the baby. You also need to make sure that the room temperature stays at a level comfortable for adults. It's suggested to keep the temperature less than 65 degrees. Sometimes people think the room needs to be warmer for baby's sake, but this isn't true. In fact, it's very important not to let the baby become too warm while it's sleeping. This means keeping the room at a comfortable temperature as well as removing layers of clothing or blankets that can overheat the baby. It's definitely important to be careful when you put babies down for a nap or to sleep at night. But there are also other SIDS risk factors you need to be aware of. One of these factors is exposure to tobacco smoke. No one should be allowed to smoke around the children in your care. SIDS is more common among babies who are exposed to smoke from tobacco during or after pregnancy. Another way to help reduce the risk of SIDS is to make sure babies don't miss any well baby checkups. They need to see the doctor for their scheduled appointments and receive their shots on time. You can encourage the parents of your daycare children by sending home regular reminder notes. Although these actions seem simple, there are several questions people have about the steps to help reduce SIDS. We've taken the time to interview some experienced child care providers, and here are the questions they asked.
I hear babies can choke if they sleep on their backs. Is that true?
Some people worry that babies who sleep on their backs will choke if they spit up or vomit while asleep. Babies turn their head to the side when they sleep, so any spit up runs down their cheek and they do not choke on it. In fact, doctors have found no increase in choking in babies who sleep on their backs.
What's wrong with laying a baby on their stomach? My mother always did.
The truth is, doctors have no way of knowing which babies will die of SIDS, but they do know this. Since there has been an increase of putting babies to sleep on their backs, there has been a decrease of SIDS deaths.
Is it okay to lay a baby on its side?
Babies who sleep on their side are in danger of rolling onto their stomachs. When you are putting a baby down to sleep, always put it on its back. Back sleeping is the best way to reduce the risk of SIDS in our infants, and it should be the only option in your home or child care facility. Babies who sleep on their side are twice as likely to die from SIDS than back sleepers.
Will a baby get flat spots on its head from back sleeping?
The answer is flat spots on the back of a baby's head are usually temporary. They typically go away a few months after the baby begins to sit up. Tummy time, when a baby is awake, is a great way to reduce flat spots. This also helps the baby's neck and shoulder muscles grow. But remember, tummy time should only take place during awake time when an adult is supervising the baby. Now that you're aware of some simple steps to reduce the risk of SIDS, it's time to put them into action. The steps we've talked about in this video are not optional. They are necessary precautions all child care providers must take to reduce the risk of SIDS among our infants. Let's review them one more time. Always put babies on their backs for sleep time. Use safety-approved cribs and firm mattresses with a tight-fitting sheet. Remove all fluffy and loose bedding and other soft items from the sleeping area. Keep all blankets and covering out of the crib during sleep time. Keep room temperature at about 65 degrees. Never let anyone smoke around the children in your care. Remind parents to take their babies to all well baby checkups.
Your most important job as a child care provider is to protect the babies in your care. There are already several ways you accomplish that goal every day. One more crucial way you can protect them is by making the steps we've discussed in this video part of your regular child care routine. When you let parents know you've incorporated SIDS risk reduction steps in your daily routine, It will only add to their peace of mind that they've chosen the best possible care for their infant. I'm not just here as a nurse. I'm here spreading the word about this unexplainable and non-discriminating syndrome because my life has been directly affected by it. As a nurse, I learned about SIDS years ago, but it wasn't until I was a mother that I found out exactly how personal SIDS can be. I lost my son to SIDS 6 years ago. He was a victim of SIDS, even though his life wasn't touched by a lot of the risk factors we've covered in this video. Please, make these action steps part of your daily child care routine. Share this information with as many other child care providers as possible. Together, you can reduce the chances that the babies you care for and love will die from sudden infant death syndrome.
Denise's son also died at the caregiver's house. One of the reasons we're seeing a huge increase in the care of somebody else is because most mothers tend to go back to work during that critical period of time between 2 and 6 months. Typically, it's not because that's where they're going. There are certain risk factors of a change of environment, different sleep environment, different people watching them. Sometimes that can be a little bit of a risk factor, but the main deal is that it's between that 2 and 6 months. So we're going to go over some of this just to make sure we're understanding. Sudden infant death syndrome, defined as the sudden unexpected death of an apparently healthy infant under the age of 1 year, which remains unexplained after the performance of a complete post-mortem investigation, which includes an autopsy, an examination of the scene of death, and a review of the child's medical history. In Iowa, it is required that any child under the age of 17 has to have an autopsy. It's not just these babies who die. So it is now put in place that children under 17 also have to have an autopsy. The examination of the scene of death, anybody who has a child who you have to call the police on, whether it's a SIDS event or some other event, make sure that you leave the scene intact the way it is. That will protect you as a caregiver. That will also protect the scene so that the police can understand fully what's going on. SIDS is the #1 cause of death for infants under 1 year of age. SIDS strikes approximately 3,000 babies a year. That has gone down tremendously. Actually, she said something about 5,000 since 1992. It was actually 8,000. SIDS has actually been reduced by 40% since 1994, late 1994, when they actually started this campaign. So a lot of things, good things are happening, but there are still some states who are not making the cut with national statistics as well, and Iowa is one of them. Sometimes it's known as crib death because babies tend to die in the crib, although that's not always true. You know how when you buy a car and you go out on the street and all of a sudden you see everybody is driving the same car that you are? Unfortunately, as a SIDS parent, now I meet a lot of other SIDS parents and you get to hear their stories. I've met a SIDS father whose baby died on his shoulder while he was shopping in Walgreens. I met a SIDS mother who was driving from her home to Toys R Us and the baby died in the car seat. They can die in other places besides the crib. However, the most common place is the crib because that's when they hunker down for that nap where they get into the heavy sleeping. SIDS has been traced back to the Old Testament in the Bible. They talk in 1 Kings chapter 3 of a baby being overlain, baby being overlain by its mother. In actuality, farther down in the verse, it talks about the baby dying suddenly and unexpectedly. In 1969, we actually had our very first definition of SIDS. It's kind of ironic that they've tracked this back to biblical times, only until, in 1969 they finally go, oh, okay, let's give this thing a name. even though they still don't know what it is. In 1989, the definition was actually amended to explain what a thorough case investigation was. The reason they had to do that is because there were liberties possibly being taken with the definition of SIDS. Some medical doctors call it SIDS, some medical doctors do not. A lot of people believe that sometimes if you can't fix it, then you don't know what it is, then maybe you failed. Unfortunately, that has led to discrepancy in some of the actual naming of SIDS in certain cases. More children, this is a statistic that always blows me away, more children die of SIDS in 1 year than those who die of cancer, heart disease, pneumonia, child abuse, AIDS, cystic fibrosis, and muscular dystrophy combined in the first 14 years. It's a lot. SIDS rates have actually decreased, though, by 40% since 1992 when we changed our sleep guidelines based on evidence brought to us by Australia. Australia has actually been the forefront in the arena of SIDS. Late 1994, the nationwide SIDS campaign actually began, although the Pediatric Association started talking about SIDS and the back to sleep in 1992. Research is ongoing. Since 1963, just before we had our first official SIDS definition, the federal commitment came along with the SIDS, Sudden Infant Death Syndrome Act, which provides a lot of funding, grants, some federal money, some private money, to make sure that we learn as much as we can about SIDS and try to figure out what it is. They use this statistics, like we've been talking about, to detect the trends. And that's the reason they came up with the back to sleep. They found that there was a correlation between sleeping on the stomach or side to sleeping on the back. Sleeping on the a baby sleeping on its tummy has 4 times larger risk of dying of SIDS than a baby sleeping on its back. Did I say that correctly? A baby sleeping on its side has it doubled. When the SIDS Alliance and all the SIDS organizations first came out, they said, place baby on side or back. That has been completely changed. It is back only unless a doctor says that baby needs to be placed in a different position. There are over 400 theories on why we have SIDS. Kind of daunting, isn't it, to think about all this research, all this stuff going on, and we still don't exactly have it pinpointed. However, they do have some great information that's come down, and it has to do with the brainstem. And an immature brainstem of a child, according to the research, this immature brainstem is the one that we can have a SIDS event with. So, the best way to explain it is this triple risk model. You have a vulnerable infant, and that's an infant that's susceptible to a threat. Along with that critical period of development, and that's up to 12 months of age. So typically 2 to 4 months is 90% of the SIDS events actually happen between 2 and 4 months. Then you have a stressor. That's something that occurs in the environment. The exogenous stressor. That's something that we can change. That's something that we control. We cannot open up a child's brain, that vulnerable infant. Can't look at their brain. We have no way of detecting whether or not they have some sort of abnormality. We can't help their age, unfortunately. Some of us wish we could, but we can't. And then those stressors, those are the only things that we can control. That's sleeping on their tummy. That's a risk factor. That's having a room that's too warm. That's a risk factor. That's the child who's in a place where there's smoke or even secondhand smoke. That is a risk factor. What we do know about SIDS is that SIDS occurs without warning. No one can tell in advance which babies would die, not even a physician, and frankly, I'm not sure I would personally want to know that. SIDS babies do not appear severely ill, although many of them do have a slight cold before they die, or some sort of upper respiratory infection. There is no severe infection that's actually found in the autopsies, however, of those babies. And unfortunately, many times a SIDS baby might be from a low-income minority family. They are at greater risk. Why do you think that might be? Any ideas? Lack of education, possibly. What else we know about SIDS is that there's a greater occurrence in the winter. Possibly that overheating factor. Drives me crazy. I'm driving in Walmart and I see a baby who's got a snowsuit on with 5 blankets over the head on the way in. Even if it's winter, that's still probably too much. Boys are at slightly greater risk than girls. 60% of SIDS deaths are boys. It was a little bit higher a few years ago. I'm not sure why it's what is causing it to come down, but it has. What SIDS is not? SIDS is not caused by the lack of love. SIDS is not caused by suffocation, vomiting, or choking. I want to get out of your way. SIDS is not contagious. It is not hereditary. Although I did hear somebody say that they knew someone who'd lost twins. It's probably the fact that their brainstem, both brainstems, were probably immature. Maybe the same stressors were in their environment. Who knows? SIDS is not caused by immunizations. That has been a concern of some parents. It should not be. They have a greater chance of catching a disease that could harm them immensely than dying of SIDS from it. So SIDS is not caused by allergies or infection. SIDS is not caused by a sleeping parent laying over on a baby. SIDS is not caused by child abuse. SIDS occurs in all families of all social and economic levels, and SIDS is no one's fault. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the sleeping parent laying on a baby, and also about all social and economic levels, because it's always interesting to me to see, do you think any stars, in Hollywood have ever lost a baby to SIDS? We don't really hear about it though, do we? Because SIDS is kind of one of those deaths that people don't talk about. In fact, before the 1990s, 1980s, if a baby died of SIDS, they didn't really talk about it because they were ashamed, they were embarrassed, they were hurting so much as well. There were a lot of different reasons. Lloyd Bridges had a child who died of SIDS. He didn't talk about it till 3 years before he died himself. He finally came out and addressed some of the SIDS organizations. Robert Redford is another SIDS parent who does not really speak on it. We kind of wish he would. We need a spokesperson, unfortunately, but it doesn't always happen. SIDS is not caused by a sleeping parent laying over on a baby. However, that is one of the greatest risk factors right now that's increasing in Iowa. We have a lot of co-sleeping going on. If you have a parent who you know is co-sleeping with their child, please encourage them to stop. I want to say 42% of our SIDS deaths this year occurred in a co-sleeping situation. And the reason that would probably be, and I say probably because nothing's ever in stone here, when you are sleeping with a child, when you're sleeping with another person, you have 2 forces of body heat together. And unfortunately, that's like, matches. It creates a very, very dangerous environment, especially for babies. Babies do not control their body functions in terms of temperature very well. And so they can't adjust to that while your body may adjust. They can't. They're also smaller. Bed covers, adult bed covers, are very dangerous for babies. I know of people who have, been nursing their baby and they fall asleep with their baby in the bed, and that's probably a different story, and hopefully they wake up and they put the baby back into its own environment. However, it's not something that we encourage. It's actually becoming a problem. I need to change this slide. SIDS risk factors. Boys die of SIDS 50% more of the time than girls. It's actually 60. Mothers who smoke during and after pregnancy is a risk factor. The younger the mother, the greater the risk. Why might that be? Any ideas? Yep. Lack of prenatal care, possibly. Also, lack of education. Under 6 months of age, 90% of the SIDS deaths occur under 6 months of age. Most occur between 2 and 4 months. My youngest is now 1. Yes. Prone sleeping is a huge risk factor. Tummy, that's your tummy sleeping, and your side sleeping. Cold weather months are risk factors. That's your fall and winter. In Arizona, we didn't really have a cold weather month, so it occurred at any time. However, I think we've kind of leveled out here in Iowa, because I know even in the spring and summer when we have some cool weather, parents they start to bundle up their babies. The heat's still on. Premature and low birth weight infants are also at risk, possibly because that immature brain stem, if the baby's born too early, they may not have been able to progress the way they should have in utero. Twins and higher multiples are at risk also. Again, you're probably, when you're going with twins and higher multiples, you're looking at that premature low birth weight baby. Mothers who smoked during and after pregnancy are at a great risk. Somebody in the house smoking. I find it ironic that cigarettes is a product that we know is very dangerous to our health. In fact, it's the only consumer product that pretty much guarantees 1/3 of its users some sort of health risk by the time they're done using it. So it's one of those products that hopefully you can encourage others not to use. I'm a big proponent of stop the smoking. Let's look at reducing the risk. How many of you at one time, maybe not today, thought that if you placed a baby on its back to sleep that they might choke when they were spitting up or whatever? I was one of them, actually. And my oldest 2 children slept on their tummies. They did not like sleeping on their back. Benjamin, that was just about the time they were starting to come out with a little bit more information, and I tried to put him on his back, but he didn't like it, and I really didn't give it a very good effort. They say babies do, and I've had 2 since Benjamin's death, and they're right. Babies learn to sleep on their back. The hardest thing for you as a caregiver is to make sure that your parents are also following through at home, because your job will be harder at your place if they are not following through at home. We're going to talk a little bit more about that when we get down to the legal issues of SIDS. I would recommend, and since it's on my mind, I would recommend to you that you place babies on their back unless instructed by a medical doctor. A parent note, according to our child care guidelines, is sufficient, but according to the Iowa SIDS Alliance, and I'm not legal at all in saying this is my just personal advice, is to make sure that you get a doctor's note. You may also want to consult an attorney if your parent absolutely forbids you to place the baby on its back. And I'll explain that more when we get down to lawsuits, unfortunately, which I don't agree with, but we'll talk about it. Infants who sleep on their backs are 3 times less likely to die of SIDS, and actually it's 4 times now. There are exceptions, of course. There are some babies who have immense regurgitation. Those are babies who, every time they are placed on their back, they have uncontrollable spitting up. That's a medical issue. That's an issue that a doctor would probably, excuse or write a note. There is no increased risk of choking. Remember that. That's something that I think, as a society, it's passed down from generation to generation and generation. Asian countries have the lowest rate of SIDS in all of the world. Does anybody have any idea why that might be? They do not sleep in beds, fluffy beds, and they do not sleep on their tummies or their sides. Maintain a smoke-free environment. Secondhand cigarette smoke exposure is strongly correlated to SIDS. By secondhand, I also mean being placed in a room where somebody has been smoking. If you've ever been in a motel and you've had a smoking room at a motel, you walk in, you know that there has been a smoker there. It's clinging to the curtains, it's clinging to the bedding, it's there, it's in the carpet. So make sure, if you have a parent or even in your own home, that you make sure that that baby is in a safe environment. Research indicates nicotine may disrupt the arousal mechanism for infants. That's your brainstem that is not working properly. Nicotine actually depresses what happens in our bodies. Another reason why it's a big risk factor. Cigarette smoke on clothing may also be harmful to infants. As of December 1st, caregivers cannot smoke around children, their children that they're watching. And Lori's cheering in the back. Provide a firm sleep surface for infants. That means no adult beds. That means no water beds. No sofas or chairs, and secondhand cribs be leery of. Some of the secondhand cribs are very old. They do not have the safety requirements that we have put into place since early 1990s probably. Now I have to tell you, Benjamin died in 1998, and I have a sister-in-law, and I have other family members and other friends who have had babies since then, and every now and then I catch one of them doing something like placing a baby on an adult bed, or placing a baby on the floor with about 10 blankets underneath of them. Be very careful. You know what's probably going to be harmful in your head. I know that you're all smart enough to know that some of these things can be continued onto other surfaces as well. I'm just having lots of trouble. You'd think there was a fan in here. There is. It's right here. Boy. We are finding a bigger connection to this next risk, and that's overheating of infants. At one time, this wasn't really considered a very big risk, but now they're finding that this is occurring in more and more SIDS deaths, overheating and overbundling, especially if an infant is sick, because they even have a less opportunity of controlling their temperature. And make sure that you dress an infant as if it's comfortable for you. Now in the video, and I saw some of you go, oh no, it said 65. I say 65 to 68, and look at your cooling or heating system. We have a cooling and heating system that are very strange, and so we may have to put ours to 70. Know your own house. You kind of know your temperature. I had a caregiver down in Centerville. She said, I'm going to freeze. My heat is always set at 78. Guess what? We can put on clothes, but they can only take off so much, unfortunately. So try to keep it the temperature between 65 and 68. That's actually pretty comfortable. You know, in the summertime, most of us have our air conditioners cranked down to 68. In the winter, for some reason, we think we have to have it up to 78 or 80. So be very cautious with that. As I said, the caregiver's house where my son died, it was 87 degrees. This was Arizona. It was June, and she was very frugal. I do not blame her because I walked into the house. The fan was going, the ceiling fan. You probably would have thought it was okay. He was only wearing a little onesie at the time. It wasn't as though there were blankets or a lot of things in the crib with him. He actually died in a playpen, but so just be careful with that. That is one thing that really stuck out in my mind, and it's actually coming back now. You know, I talked a little bit about that sleep surface. I got to go back to that because isn't this pretty? I just love this. I bought this when my first daughter was born, and this was my favorite. They were soft and cuddly. I just couldn't wait to get it home and get it on the bed, and my bed looked beautiful. My bed, the crib for my last two children are so awful. Nothing in it at all. Do not use these things. The reason being is that where is the first place that a baby scoots to in the crib if you have these there? The corner where your bumper pads are, or the blanket that's in the corner at that point or on them. Very important. I had a lady who said, well, what do we do with them? You could use them as a valance for the room. You could use it around the outside of the crib. You could donate it to your hospital auxiliary so they can make teddy bears. You can make teddy bears or some other thing with it. So if you have something like this, try to eliminate it. It's the worst thing, and they make so much money off of this stuff. You can spend oodles and oodles and oodles of dollars, and I hope that you don't have a daughter or a granddaughter or yourself who's just gone out and spent $300 on brand new fluffy bedding for your crib, because I would apologize to you for that. Another thing that I actually didn't talk about was how to dress your baby. This is perfectly fine for a baby to sleep in. The Iowa SIDS Alliance really does not like the use of blankets in beds. However, the government and the National SIDS Alliance has said if you're going to use a blanket, it's feet to foot. Put the baby toward the foot of the bed and tuck the blanket around so that the baby can't get under in its face. So if you're going to do that. Another thing, there is a SIDS parent who actually created this garment. It's called the sleep sack. It was given to me, and we used it. It's not necessary. It was kind of fun, to use. Baby didn't get tangled up in it. Made sure it was warm. I felt okay about that. But the same thing can be accomplished with a thermal pajamas. So you don't have to go out and buy something like this, but try to keep babies. Lori.
Are they too hot if you put those jammies on the baby with a onesie on?
No, but it would depend on the climate in your house as well. So our house is a little bit on the cool side. It's maybe not. The breeze kind of rushes through. So I might put this and this together in my house because we do keep our temperature fairly low. However, it really depends on your house. I felt uncomfortable because there were not sleeves. So I wanted long sleeves for my child in something like this. I would not recommend going out and spending the $40 or $50, whatever it costs. You can get sleepers for the same. Make sure the infants receive all of their scheduled immunizations. Healthy children are at lower risk for SIDS. They say 50% actually have some sort of cold or something in there. So if we keep them healthy, we actually are helping things out. Provide waking hour tummy time for all infants to help develop upper body strength. That's really important. I had a caregiver at the presentation I did last week in Centerville, and she said, I am just so afraid. I don't even want to put the baby on its tummy ever. No, they need to be on their tummy. They need to use their motor skills. They need to learn. They need to be able to crawl one day. And we all know we want them to walk. I don't know why we want them to walk, but we do. So make sure that you're providing that. Okay, let's go over those risk reducers. Always place the baby on his back to sleep. You can't see that bottom one, can you? Use a firm mattress and a safety-approved crib. That's important. Adult beds are no-nos. Eliminate fluffy, loose bedding from the baby's sleep area. These things. Keep the baby's face clear of coverings. Don't allow anyone to smoke around the baby. Do not let the baby sleep in a room where smoking is allowed, even if no one smokes while the baby's in the room. That's secondhand smoke factor. Be careful not to overheat or overbundle the baby. Keep room temperature between 65 and 68 degrees, and encourage your parents not to co-sleep with their children. There has been some proponents of that, but due to the recent statistics with SIDS and what's been going on, I think the worst thing that could happen is wake up in the morning and have your child dead laying next to you. I actually had a friend in Arizona. She was a medical doctor, a pediatrician, and her child died of SIDS. She co-slept with her child. If you can only imagine, which hopefully you can't, because I can't imagine that. I'll show you one more snippet video before we talk a little bit about legalities, lawsuits, and how to protect yourself. This is my catchiest video yet, so if you go humming out of this, be happy. Maybe a little frightened, too.
Healthy baby, it's back to sleep to keep baby safe. It's back to sleep.
Our federal government actually designed this one.
I'll see you later. So I just found out about the sudden infant death syndrome thing. You know, SIDS.
Can you hear it back there?
Hospital where I work part-time.
I never gave it much thought until now.
I have a new baby sister, and hey, I want to protect her from dying from it. They say you should put healthy babies on their backs to sleep. Yeah, that's one of the most important things.
Grandma, I know what science. What did you do when you were pregnant? Oh, we did our regular work. You know, Creator gave us women the honor and the privilege of bringing life into the world and of nurturing that life. Now is a sacred time to take care of yourself and your unborn baby.
I know. I quit smoking. What? Do I have to get with raspberry too?
No! Just eat a balanced diet while you're pregnant. And no smoking and no drinking. Even while you're breastfeeding. Because you know what goes into your body? That goes into the baby.
Did any babies die of SIDS when you were young? It's such a scary thing, but I hear if you put them on their backs to sleep, it lowers the SIDS risk.
Oh, we really didn't know about SIDS. We took very good care of ourselves, and we put our babies in cradle boards on their back. Hey, we have to start thinking about making your baby a cradle board.
I already knew you shouldn't smoke or drink while you're pregnant. But I didn't know you could overbundle a baby and keep her too warm. They also said you shouldn't let her sleep on a soft mattress or with soft stuffed toys and pillows.
How many of you are grandparents in here?
Good morning.
Hi, Daddy. Papa's already been changed and had his breakfast. And remember, he goes on his back to sleep, even for his nap. Okay? And don't forget to change his diaper. And I'm putting it on before he goes back, okay?
Relax, son. I've been taking care of babies for a long time. I read the back to sleep article. I know all about SIDS. Little Bobby and I are going to be just fine. After all, I took good care of you, didn't I?
I don't know why she's so nervous. We'll be back before you know it. We've got a doctor's appointment this afternoon for his baby shots. Oh yeah, his favorite toy is in the diaper bag. And the pacifier is in the car seat. And the phone number is in the outside pocket. And you just call. You can just be right over here.
I'm glad to see that you're not nervous either.
All right.
Bye, Bobby.
You'll
Bye,
be
Bobby.
just fine. Walking the party.
You know, it's really important to see a doctor when you're pregnant.
How old is the baby?
Oh, she's 2 months.
Isn't she cute?
Well, I just turned 8 weeks.
Jimmy, get off of that top ladder!
Sometimes he scares the daylights out of me.
There's so much to worry about. And not just when they get older, even now. You know, I heard about sudden infant death syndrome. That would be terrible.
She'll be fine.
Let me ask you something. Do you put your new baby on his back to sleep? You know, my doctor and nurse and all the experts say that healthy babies should sleep on their backs to help guard against SIDS. And they now know that they won't choke if they spit up.
That's right, I've heard that a couple of places. And my doctor reminded me in her last will. And besides, that's how this little one likes to sleep anyway. Oh, I am so lucky to have 2 healthy kids.
Jimmy, you get over here right now and apologize to that little girl.
SIDS doesn't care what color your skin is or how much money you make. It can take your baby. Learn more about SIDS.
Now that woman at the end, I am sure most of us would have been a little bit different in our approach. Get off of there! I love it. Lawsuits and liability. As I said, SIDS deaths occur in about 1/5 of the SIDS deaths occur in a child care setting, whether it's a child care large group center or it's the home of a child care provider. That's the scary part for you. What I want to encourage you is to continue doing what you do and watching all children. What I'm here to do is to help arm you with information, education, so that you can protect yourself, you can protect the children that you're with as well. Keep that in mind when we're talking about this next topic. I was asked to share some things with you. I'm a little uncomfortable with it because my child died in a child care setting, and I have absolutely no hard feelings for my child care provider. We're very, very good friends. I do not blame her. I do not know if it would have happened in my care. It could have. Who knows? However, there are huge cases that have been decided since 1999. In 1999, our most pivotal case on SIDS actually happened in Connecticut. A jury decided that a child care provider who was actually an individual who worked at a child care place, big place, was liable for the death of the child. The jury granted an $800,000 settlement to the family. It was a lose-lose situation, essentially. The reason I believe the parents said that they went after is more for setting a precedence so that all child care providers would be concerned and aware of SIDS. This child was placed on its tummy to sleep and succumbed. Again, I need to tell you that I don't necessarily agree. I can tell you what has been written, however, about this one case. All 6 doctors at the state's Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Connecticut have taken the unprecedented step of publicly opposing a jury verdict that held a Bolton daycare provider liable for the death of the baby. By the way, they sued that one individual, not the owner, that one worker. SIDS is still unknown, they said. We don't really know what causes it. The fact that they had an $800,000 settlement. Shelby died on the second day, the daughter died on the second day at the child care provider's house. I encourage you to have your parents bring their babies over a couple of times before they actually drop them off for the whole day. Big case. Set of precedents. Guess what? Lots of them coming down the pike now. And it's unfortunate. And again, I don't necessarily agree. Jury awarded a couple in Georgia $1 million for the death of their child that was placed on its stomach, died of SIDS. By the way, attorneys are soliciting SIDS parents for this. Most of them don't just say, I'm going to sue the pants off that child care provider. There are attorneys who are out there going after this. In Indianapolis, parents sued the child care provider. The parents won. No one actually really wins in these cases. The licensed child care provider, she was in a home situation. She had too many children in her home. And the parents had taken a pack and play for their child to sleep in, but the child care provider put the baby on an adult bed. I do not know if that child was on its stomach or not, but the child was put in an unsafe place. Currently, a baby died on December 8th of 2001. There's litigation right now. This is in North Carolina. North Carolina has started a statewide Healthy Start Foundation's Back to Sleep campaign where they're doing exactly what we're doing here. Is it's actually a requirement that all child care providers, licensed or not, has to go through SIDS training because of that one lawsuit, which has not been settled yet. It's still ongoing. These are just ones that have actually gone to juries. They've all actually been public. I know of several that have been settled out of court. Had some friends in Arizona that did it. Disagree with it. However, it happens.
Can't you have any cases of children that are 6, 7, 8 months old that are rolling on their own, and you put them on their back and they roll their stomach? And then...
I do not. Most of the cases occur in a contract situation when in their contract it states that they want their baby placed on its stomach and the provider provides an unsafe sleeping condition. That's...
So they want them on their back, but they do the opposite.
If they're rolling, I don't know what the litigation would be on that. Typically it's happening when they're not rolling at the time, the litigation at least. I think that their litigation chances would probably be minimized if they were rolling. So I really don't have any cases on that one yet, but unfortunately they're coming in, and every now I get one I go, oh dear, I can't believe this is occurring. As I said, many settlement cases are not decided by the jury.
Do you suggest if, like at 7, 8 months, when they do roll over on their stomach, that we're
going to talk about that.
Go ahead and place them back on their back then?
Yes. What do you do when the child is rolling? When you go in, how many of you go in to check on the babies at least once? When you go in, and you check on them, you can gently roll them over. For the most part, if you go in after 15 minutes, and they've been quiet for 15 minutes, they're finally in their sleep, and you can gently roll them over, they typically will stay there. I know this because of my last 2 children. At some point, you have to say, I can't do anything else. You need to discuss it with the parents. Because you can't stay there the whole time. You have other children, and it's not good for you, it's not good for the child, it's not good for the other children. However, when you go in, you find the baby on its tummy, and it's a rolling baby. Roll the baby over. That was an excellent question. I did have a caregiver who asked, well, what happens if they just continue to do that? I said, well, you need to work out a plan with the parents at that point. Typically, they learn. They do. I hate to say it, but if you're consistent and you can get the parents to be consistent, that is your battle right there, is consistency between you and the home, the actual home. Did you have a question?
I'm just thinking to myself, I'm sorry.
Okay, it's okay. What I recommend is that you teach to the best practice. Don't go by the minimum child care standards. They are there as a starting place. Go above and beyond. Reach for the stars. Do what you can do that will protect you. If you have a safe environment and something, hopefully would never happen, but if something would happen, you have protected yourself. You have done your best. I know of people who have lost their child. There have been not one risk factor. It just happened. You can't tell. Don't count on the Iowa law to protect you either. I know we've discussed this. However, I had a meeting with the Iowa SIDS board. We talked about this. Do not count on the Iowa law to protect you. Protect yourself if you need to. Most of you have contracts with your parents, possibly. Maybe not. That might be something you might want to think about. Also, you might want to consult a lawyer for advice if they've refused to allow you to put the baby on its back, or they refuse to allow you to put the baby in a safer sleep environment. That you just need to protect yourself. And I don't want you to get completely freaked out and worried, but I do want you to be protected as well as the babies. I have for you a couple of things. The National SIDS and Infant Death Program Support Center has a sudden infant death syndrome and child care provider setting policy on infant sleep position. It is really a very good sheet for caregivers on how to approach the parents. It kind of gives you some guidelines. What's your infant sleep policy, what the infant sleep policy actually says, sharing this policy with the parents. It has some really, really good information. The National Health and Human Services are so wonderful about sending out free things. I also have something that maybe you'll never need, and I hope not. It's emergency procedures. I know you've all probably been through CPR training and all that. I don't know if you have it posted somewhere, you have it in a folder, or if you're like me, you have it in a drawer that you have to dig through about 20 other things to get to it. But I made a little card that you might want to put on a refrigerator in case something happens where there is a problem and you need some medical assistance, whether it's a SIDS event or something else. The emergency procedures that we came up with start CPR. I don't think I have to explain that on here. You all know what CPR is. I was very lucky. My child care provider was not a registered provider, but she did know CPR. She did start it. She did work on Benjamin, and the police came and took over, and the ambulance did as well. Dial 911 during your breaths. This is the difficult thing. Calm the other children and remove them from the area. If you have an older child that you can say, hey, go, out back or go downstairs or whatever. law enforcement will contact the child's parents. That's one component that you do not need to worry about. In fact, my child care provider was not allowed to call us. At that time, it was considered a crime scene. That's not to offend you, but that will be how they treat it. Call the parents of the other children, though. Frankly, if you're in your own home, in your own setting, if something disastrous like that happens, you're not going to be fit to take care of it. Have a neighbor or call your husband or call somebody to come over and help you, but call the other children's parents and tell them the situation and they need to come pick up their children. Call your licensing agency. Very important to notify them of a situation that has occurred at that time. And as much as possible, leave the area where the baby was found undisturbed. Don't clean anything. Don't tidy. You know, some of us are a little paranoid about how our home looks when the police arrive. So leave it as it is. The reason being, if you move something or something changes, there might be questions. You don't want any questions. And that has occurred. There have been child care providers who have been looked at in, you know, it depends on the police department or the agency who steps in. I'm sorry. But you just want to protect yourself. You want to be in a situation, I can honestly say, for me personally, if something like that would happen, my mind would go blank and I go, I don't care how much training you have. If you're not in that situation every day, you possibly can forget. I would, you know, try to put these on your fridge or somewhere where you can access it, because this is one thing. Oh yeah, now I remember what to do. This is for you. We've gone over a lot, and I really, really, really hope that this has been encouragement, possibly to change something, to tell somebody else what you've learned. And if you have any questions, I really think that if you have a question, somebody else might have the same question. So if you have some questions that maybe have popped up, whether it's about the legalities, about sleep environment, about SIDS in general, or a personal question for me, besides how much I weigh and how tall I really am. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
I cared for a 2-month-old little girl who both of her parents smoked,
Mm-hmm.
and you could smell it on her clothes and on her diaper bag and everything. In that situation, I didn't even think of it at the time, but would it have been better for me to keep some clothes and change her when she got to my place? Because her clothes would be a risk factor, right?
If you have parents who smoke and they are unwilling to change their environment, the best thing you can do is possibly to change that environment, like you suggested. Have some clothing for them when they're in your care. You also might want to take some extra pamphlets from me. I do not mind if you want to take some, whether you have parents now or next year or the year after that or the year after that. Magnets back there, and say, look, you might offend them, but you know what? It's okay to offend. I've decided this. My decision, and you can say it's my decision if you want to. Well, Karen Swanson said I can offend you, but they need to create a safe environment for their child. And you may say, here are my concerns as a caregiver. I just would like to share some information with you, and then you can proceed with what you just suggested. Put on some separate, clothing that you have at your own home.
Might it be better, would you suggest that we don't care for parents who smoke?
No, I wouldn't suggest that, because the best thing that you can do is try to educate those parents. I mean, if everybody says, no, I'm not going to take care of kids of parents who smoke, then what are they going to do? I mean, right now in Fairfield, we already have a situation where we have a lot of parents who can't find a caregiver, because everybody's pretty much full. I'm guessing most of you are pretty full right now, too. So, yeah, I would certainly try to educate. That's the best thing that you can do, is pass along the information.
So, past 1 year, past 12 months, the risk factor goes way down? Is it completely gone? I've got a 2-year-old that likes to sleep with the blanket, and his parents bring the blanket, and
That's okay.
so I
Yeah,
didn't
they
know if
say
that was-
SIDS actually is up until 1 year of age, and there are some certain phenomenon that actually occurs, and they're calling it SIDS, sudden unexpected death. I don't think there's anything that you can do about that at that point. Okay, when we're talking about SIDS, we're talking about events that occur before 1 year of age. Good question.
I have a newborn at home, and one of the things that I bought at the store that I had to have was knowing that besides the bumper pad, was they call it a curved back sleeper.
Yes.
When you lay your child on their back, and then it has the 2 pillars on the side so they can't roll. Is that recommended or not?
The question was, if you bought the wedge to try to keep your child on its back, I would recommend to keep your receipt and try to take it back.
That's why I asked.
We do not endorse it. There are a few reasons. First of all, babies wiggle. They wiggle down, and then they wiggle in, and then pretty soon it's the same situation as a bumper pad. That first situation I had with SIDS in Arizona in 1996, her child was in a wedge. I don't think I would correlate it or link it to SIDS, but it's not really of any assistance, and it can be more of a hindrance. So I would recommend taking it back or putting it away or using it as a neck rest in the car as you're driving to Omaha. I'm sorry. And that's one reason why we're very careful about products that we endorse. I just saw a product in one of those Right Start magazines, and I started looking. It's called the Snuggle Nest, and it's a little device that you can use to make sure that you can co-sleep with your baby in bed, and it looks like a little bumper pad that would separate the baby from you. Well, the bumper pad is about 3 inches high and made of foam. So it's one product that we're trying to eliminate right now because it's misinforming people. It's not a safe product. So, be leery of some of those. This little sleeper is the only one that we've ever endorsed. And I personally, it's not going to create a hazardous environment for SIDS, but I don't necessarily endorse it because it's expensive, and you can get the same with something else. Other questions? How many of you change the children that you watch before they go down for a nap? Not just diapers, I'm talking clothing, and you put them in separate clothing. I don't either. So in that case, just make sure that they are in the type of clothing. Take off if you need to peel off something. Make sure that they will be cool enough. You saw in the video they were taking off socks. I don't know if you have to take off socks. It depends on what they're wearing. So use your common sense, and I think that's the most important thing. Common sense rules for the most part. Use your common sense with it. How many of you are a little bit scared now? That's good.
Now go to the how many of you are scared to death now?
This is one thing. I don't want you to stop watching children because, frankly, we don't know what's going to happen, but we need to encourage better sleep environments. How many of you will change something in your home because of what you've learned today? Just think about it. You don't even have to raise your hand. I know that 4 years ago, if I had the guts to attend a presentation about something like this, which, I commend all of you because, frankly, it's kind of scary in your situation, watching kids all day. You see a lot of kids more than their parents anymore. I give you a big pat on the back. I don't think I would have come to learn this information. In fact, I think I used to just flip through the you see an article in all these magazines, SIDS, this, SIDS, that, and I think I just flip right through it because it wasn't going to affect me. What did I need to read it for? Some of you don't have children anymore. Maybe you have grandchildren on the way, or someday on the way. And although you're caregivers, you're still maybe thinking, well, it's not going to happen to me. My caregiver thought that. She'd been babysitting for 30 years already. She was golden. There was nothing going to happen to her. And it did. So unfortunately, it does happen, and I do hope that it will never happen to you. Any other questions? Yeah.
If there are no extra things that can cause problems in the situation, no extra risk factors?
Yes.
What are the actual statistics, do you know?
On the...
Like, if I'm not a smoker and everything, what are the chances that I would...
It's actually pretty low. And I don't know the actual statistics. I know that the risk factors are back sleeping, or tummy sleeping and smoking have the highest risks. So they're linking that, and I don't have those statistics. However, it does happen, but it's more rare. You eliminate quite a bit of the risk. So, and that's all you can do is eliminate those extra stressors. That's what I call them, stressors. Something that stress their bodily function. Any other questions?
This is the first time I've ever heard of heat having an effect.
Isn't it interesting? Because
I've heard of babies dying from being overbundled and that, but I've never associated it with SIDS.
Well, and the reason that I talk about the medical component, even though it's dry and maybe you don't understand it quite as well, is when you understand that it's possibly in the brainstem, and I compare it to a light switch going off. When a baby has one of those extra stressors that it just can't handle, that light switch just kind of goes off and it doesn't come back on. That's the problem. A SIDS infant has never been revived to sustain life. We did have a child here in Iowa a couple years ago who had a SIDS incident, went into a coma, and did die within 2 days. They were able to resuscitate. So the fact is the baby probably had a SIDS event. They caught it at just the right moment, enough to bring it sort of back, but it was on life support systems. And when my caregiver found Benjamin, he was still warm, as though, she said it could have happened just right before she walked in there. So you just never know. And that's one reason why we explain the medical part, because all these things kind of make sense after you hear that maybe it has to do with something that's immature in their system, and that's why overheating hurts them or is a risk factor. That's why sleeping on their tummy. They're actually saying now, some other information that has just recently come out, is when a baby's on its tummy, its head is to the side and there's a circulation problem, possibly. The infection part, some of the newer research, has to do with an E. coli bacteria that they're finding in all babies who have died of SIDS. Somewhere within their system, they're finding an E. coli bacteria in their blood. I'm not understanding it. They're still doing a lot of research. So that has to do with the colds, possibly. So there is research going on. Unfortunately, because the rates have reduced so much in the last 10 years, they're looking at cutting our funding for the research. They haven't found out what's wrong, but unfortunately they're looking to cut funding because of that. So I'm kind of on a crusade there too. In the back of the room, I have a poster board with faces of SIDS. I encourage you to look at it on your way out. Those babies look very normal. They look like probably any child you've ever seen walking through Walmart or the grocery store. Some of them are sitting up. Some of them have great smiles on their faces that you can't even imagine. And those are the children that have died. My Faces of SIDS is not up to date. There should be almost 60 more children that should be up there. I created this in 2000. We've had, between 1998 and 1999, our rates in Iowa increased by 50%. We had 48 deaths in 1999. They are coming down slowly. We are still not at the national average. which is in the low 20s. So that's one reason why the Iowa SIDS Alliance and the National SIDS Alliance and any SIDS organization is asking us to go out and try to get not only the parents but the people who are in contact with the parents, and that would be you, because you are so important in the lives of our children.
Have they ever found a correlation between SIDS and the babies that just stop breathing? I mean, and then they have them on those.
The apnea episodes, is that what you're talking about? That's a tricky subject. And I say that because they're not sure if there is any association. However, remember, a baby who has an apnea episode will come out of it. A SIDS baby does not. So the thinking and the medical research that's going along with that is stating that there really isn't anything. They might be similar in some of the medical aspect with it. However, they're completely different events. But that's an excellent question. Lori?
I did more research. I read an article a couple years ago that they were finding that some of these babies were re-inhaling exhaled CO2 of being trapped, and that was what was killing them. Have they had any more research?
Yeah, I can't believe I haven't even talked about that one yet. The rebreathing factor, laying on its tummy, the bumper pads. When you rebreathe your own air, you're getting huge amount of carbon dioxide that's coming back in at you. These babies who have that vulnerable infant that I was talking about, that something that's not connected well, when they rebreathe, they shut down. That could be maybe their light switch that's going off. That's why tummy sleeping, they're thinking, a big reason why tummy sleeping is a problem, as well as the overheating factor with tummy sleeping, because you get kind of nice and warm and cuddly when you're on your tummy. I know I do, at least. And then the bumper pads and the blankets and the stuffed animals, all those things create a hazardous environment with the rebreathing factor. Thank you for bringing that up. I did have it in my notes. I guess I blew past it. Any other questions? Yeah.
What about babies that, I know my children have always been very susceptible to like upper respiratory.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times I take a very thin pillow, prop them up to help them breathe at night. Not a big fluffy, but just enough to raise their shoulders and their head.
Put it under the mattress in the crib. Instead of in the crib, raise the crib up. You can do that with books. The question was, in case you didn't quite understand, is if a baby has a upper respiratory infection, you want to keep them propped up, can you put a pillow or something like that, not even a fluffy one? Any type of pillow in an infant's bed is considered a hazard. So my recommendation is to change that now. Put something in between the mattresses in the crib instead of in the crib. Good question, though. My kids...
Stick him in the car seat a lot of times, just so he'll sitting up.
Yeah.
But he's uncomfortable sitting.
Yeah, but babies also need to remember to sleep in. So don't panic about this also. I should probably tell you, don't start sleeping the babies that you're caring for in car seats all the time. Someone actually asked me that, and I said, no, you're going to create really poor sleeping habits then. They do need to sleep in beds, and they need to learn to sleep in beds, and you're just part of the learning process. Good question.
Maybe totally off the wall, but is there a correlation between that really deep sleep? I've not seen anything. I have an infant that I care for that I set up the playpen in the living room so I can have easy access to that child. Plus, I don't want it to get into that really deep sleep where it just may not wake up.
Well, she's asking, that's a good question. Is there any type of correlation between a deep sleeping infant and, an infant who's maybe a lighter sleeper? Yeah, actually, they do say that a lot of our SIDS babies are really deep sleepers. They get into that deep sleep, and they're having one of those events that a normal baby who has maybe a normal brain stem or whatever would be able to get out of. But because they're in a deep sleep, because they have all these stressors going on at the same time, possibly, maybe not, they can't get out of the event. They don't know to turn their head if they've taken in too much carbon dioxide because they're just in la-la land, literally sleeping. So yeah, there is a lower rate, I believe, of SIDS in the larger daycare settings than in the smaller daycare settings, just because you have a noise factor and the babies actually don't rest very well for the most part. So I don't know the statistics on that, but I encourage you just to have a safe sleep environment. I don't think you necessarily need to have the baby out in the middle of the room, but if that makes you feel better and baby's still resting, hey, that's okay.
Another thing that you mentioned was that it usually occurs when it goes to the daycare provider within the first week or a few days.
Many times a baby would succumb to SIDS during that first week at a daycare provider's. There's a change of environment possibly there. Whether it's change from mama to daycare provider, or there's a change in bedding, change in sleeping practices. You know, there's a whole plethora of reasons why that could happen. I don't know. My son died 5 weeks after he was there, so you know, it didn't necessarily. It was, and a lot of times it's just that it's between that 2 to 4 month period that's the most critical, and the 90% of them die between that 2 to 4 months. Now, it doesn't mean when they get to 4 months that you're out of the woods or that, you know, hoo-hoo, it's party time, because you still need to follow safe sleep practices.
Well, what I was getting at, is there anything that we can do to reduce that, you know, coming into the new environment, other than what we've discussed tonight?
Really discuss the sleeping practice with the parents, what the routine is at their own home. If they have a recorder that they play the same music every day at their own home, have them bring that. That's part of their routine that they've already set up. Try to make it a nice segue from their home into your home. I recommend that you meet with the family, the baby, you know, a couple of times. At least they'll have some sort of interaction with you, and it's not going to be such a huge change. I know we all say, oh, kids adapt, it's okay. Well, yeah, they do. Most of them do, but some of them have a little bit more difficult time in making a transition. So I would recommend just having them come and meet. And most of them probably do that already, because most parents of new babies are, you know, just as paranoid about leaving their babies as you are taking them. But that I would recommend that you try to find out what their routine is. And I think that's probably, the change in routine might be, you know, one of those connectors. Other questions?
I have a problem. It's not really a problem, but the issue with the older baby, my little one's 8.5 months. She sleeps on her belly with her butt in the air, and she's so cute. And I just can't imagine that I have to go in there and keep flipping her, because she'll flip right back. But yet, I know if
that's something that you need to discuss with your doctor.
I would be. I'd be thinking, I'm going to check and over, back over.
Just sew Velcro on the back of
Yeah.
your sleeper and
Stick
stick
it
it
I like that idea.
Somebody else done that, I bet.
Now, from a personal point of view, Matthew, my youngest, is and has been the same way. And I did sit down with my pediatrician and I said, look, I'm neurotic enough as it is. I flip him over, he flips back over. I turn him over, he turns back over. I'm up 5 times in the middle of the night doing this. What can I do? And you have to discuss it with your doctor at this point. My doctor said, you need peace of mind and sleep. And encourage your child to sleep on its back as much as you can. But you also need sleep. So I don't go in. But my child is now 1. Woo-hoo! Which is good. And I don't know what to tell you except for encourage that. Try to make sure that everything's out of the crib that you can. I mean, that would be something that I would really look at.
Well, I put her down awake. She goes to bed awake, and she has
Yeah.
a little sleepy blanket that has a little kitty cat thing on it. Nothing can come off of it. But she sits that and snuggles with it, and she's out. I don't have to rock her, and I haven't gotten in that habit. And I do. If she's not on top of it, I take it out. She never looks for it, wakes up like a pacifier. But it's something she comforts herself with, and she lays there and talks to it. And
Yeah.
it's like this big. And I know she can get it trapped, but she never does. I mean, she just hasn't yet.
You know, before you go to bed at night, I would say go in, turn her over if she is on her back. There are many times when I've turned my son over and he's just out. You know, he's out of it at that point. Now in the morning when I go in, he might be on his tummy again. But I've done the best that I can do as a parent. And that's what you have to remind yourself.
And I have found too, if I put her down with a bottle, which I know the dental people say you don't do that. But if I do put her down with the bottle, she'll fall asleep, the bottle will fall out, and she's on her back, crash, and she'll stay that way all night. It's when I put her down awake that she's rolling around and playing that she ends up asleep on her stomach.
Whatever you can do to get your baby to sleep is probably okay. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to tell you not to put your baby down with a bottle. I know, I mean, they've been saying that, but I'm sure there are people in this room who said, I used to do that all the time, and so, you know,
You're all right.
And you're all right. You know, I've learned not to say that because I know my mother would say, when SIDS first started getting noticed in the mid-90s, she started saying, well, you all slept on your tummy and you turned out okay. And that's one of those things that be careful what you say. So I would encourage you, next time you go to your doctor, just talk to them a little bit about it, and maybe they have some other solutions. And if not, remember, sleep is very important for both you and baby, so peace of mind. Remember that once they pass that 6 months, 90% of them occur. 90% of the SIDS deaths occur before six months. So you're doing pretty good. But safe sleep is still important. Exactly. Counting down is good. Any other questions?
The video talked about laying them on their back, making a flat spot.
Mm-hmm.
The question was, does it cause flat spots? And the answer was, most flat spots go away. Well, that wasn't.
That was a good non-answer, wasn't it?
Non-answer, yeah. It does cause.
You know, I've never had a child who's had a flat spot.
I think you have them enough during the day. And
I would agree. If the children are up on their tummy and you give them proper tummy time, I think they're going to be okay. I personally have never had a flat-headed child. I don't know of many people, although I've seen them. You know, they're the ones who are wearing the helmets, and there might be some other medical condition along with that maybe we don't know. Yeah. I don't know the ansor to that because I've never personally experienced it and I've never really seen it. So, but they do address that because that's a concern of many parents. That is, you know, we all dislike change, or most of us dislike change, and so sometimes we come up with excuses or reasons as to not change something. So I think in the video and as in some of the information I have, we're just trying to hit you with as much as we can to try to get you to change some of the unsafe sleeping practices that we have, or unsafe environmental practices that we have.
You were saying that they think when they were laying on their stomach and they would turn their head that maybe the circulation
Mm-hmm.
would go. My daughter would lay on her back, but she would turn her head. Would that bend?
And it looks strange. The question was whether, if they're on their stomachs and they turn their head so far that the circulation is somehow prevented, if that happens on the back, I don't know. I know my kids that sometimes were so into their bed on their back that it looked as though that would happen. I don't know. They're just now really researching that to see how much of a correlation. They're finding that there is a correlation, but how much of a correlation, I'm not sure. This is some of the newest research that's really come out in the last couple of years. We've been really stagnant in terms of trying to find some more answers and more correlations. So, I guess I told you that more as an aside. This is just some new research that's coming out, and I don't know all that's actually come with it. Sometimes, you hear the research, and then the next month you hear, oh, never mind. We found something else instead. So, other questions?
This is more of a comment, but I found that with the really young ones, like 2 months old or something, when you do try to do the tummy time, then they immediately go to sleep because it's comfortable, and they just, so then you roll them back over, but it's hard to get that time in, I think.
I love my boppy.
Yeah.
The C-shaped pillow that most breastfeeding women use. It's got a cutout, and when you go to tummy time, you just set him up on the tummy. Put his arms over it.
Sure, if they're in that.
Yeah, he stays awake, and he just loves that thing.
Good. So.
Propped up.
Yeah. Typically, if they fall asleep, though, they're tired. So, even if they get a few minutes on their tummy, it's probably better than none. So, I would continue the tummy time when they're awake, definitely.
I have found out through the courses that the more time they spend on their back, the more time they do not like their tummy.
Yes.
That I usually have more problems trying to get them to get tummy than I have not, because they don't want to be on their tummy.
Congratulations. She just said, I don't know if you all heard, she just said that she found that the more time that she put them on their back, the more time that they liked being on their back. So I say congratulations to you, because you have just now told everybody that you can train a child to be on their back. And that's...
And it's really hard to get them to go on their tummy to get up there.
You're right.
Until they're 3.5 to 4 months old.
And then you have to train them then to go on their tummy. So
it only lasts for a minute or so sometimes at one time.
Yeah. Training is what it's all about. So you can train them to be on their tummy as well.
Right.
So, but that's an excellent point. Other questions? We've talked a lot about risk reducers. We've talked a lot about risk factors. But I want to thank you, because I think you're all risk takers in coming tonight. And I know that you do get some points for this. However, you have just learned a lot, hopefully. Hopefully this will maybe change something in your own home. Hopefully you've got some information that you can share with other people. Whether it's a young adult, another adult, an older adult, and hopefully we can change our SIDS statistics, and they can drop even further than they have. Thank you very much for coming tonight. There are materials in the back. Take them all. Clean me out. It's okay. If you have any questions or concerns, you can talk to Lori. You can contact me at any time. I do have some cards over there as well. So, thank you again.
Thank you.